Well, thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate it. My name's Wendy Sweetser, and I work for an organization called the Trustees of Reservations, and I'm here to talk to you today about permanently protecting snowmobile trails. So I know that you're all here because you want to make sure that your favorite trails are available for yourselves forever and for future generations. And I wish I could tell you that I had a magic wand that would just, permanently preserve those places, or a big bag of cash that would enable you to purchase them and have them available forever. But the reality is it actually requires some kind of technical legal tools in order to protect those trails forever. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is how to protect an entire piece of land that has a snowmobile trail on it, and how to protect just a trail on a given piece of land. So I hope that's what you're here to learn more about. This is my first presentation in front of an international audience. I'm a little excited about that. So is there anybody here that's actually from outside of the US? Yay! Wow, welcome. Very exciting. Where are y'all from? Canada. You guys? Canada over there? Where? Quebec. Not Canada, Quebec. And is anybody part of a club or an organization that is already protecting trails or owning trails? You guys, great. Good. Wow. A lot of Canadians are protecting trails. That's super. So we'll have some, maybe some additional information about how you are accomplishing that in your necks of the woods. All right, well, to get started, the Trustees of Reservations, it's the organization that I work for. We're a statewide land trust, which is a nonprofit organization that works with landowners to protect land. We have a couple different tools that I'll tell you more about. The Trustees are actually the first land trust in the world. We were founded in 1891 by a fellow named Charles Eliot, who worked with Frederick Law Olmsted in Boston. Kind of saw even then, suburban sprawl starting in 1891, and recognized the need to permanently protect land for people to use and enjoy. And that's why he founded the Trustees all those years ago. So we work across Massachusetts. Those little dots are properties that we own. We currently have about 105 properties, all of which are open to the public for recreation, largely hiking, bird watching, biking, but we all have a couple of properties that are open for snowmobile use as well. These are just a couple pretty shots of our properties. This is in eastern Massachusetts. This is a place called Notchview in western Mass, where we have an active snowmobile trail. And then a couple beautiful places in the Berkshires. This is a place called Bartholomew's Cobble in Sheffield, and a lovely farm in Williamstown in the northwest corner of Massachusetts. So the Trustees really specialize in owning land, like I said, and working with landowners to protect their land through something called a conservation easement. And this is really what the land trust community is working against. This is the ton of development pressures in Massachusetts. So the darker the color, the higher the growth pressure. This map is a little outdated, but these are the towns that are growing over 10% in 1999. So it's using old census data, but you can kind of see the suburban sprawl push moving west from Boston and Worcester into western Massachusetts, where the vast majority of our snowmobile trails and all of our other kind of intact natural resources are. So that's just to give you a sense of what the land trust community is kind of aware of, and likely what a lot of the snowmobile clubs in western Massachusetts are feeling. Has anybody here lost a trail to new development of new houses, new commercial development, or just new landowners moving to town and saying, "See ya, I'm done with snowmobiling"? Yeah. So that's almost half the folks in the room are nodding or raising their heads. I mean, this is a reality that's happening all across the country. And the best ways to actually start addressing this are through these permanent trail easements. That's one way. The other way is to actually start working more closely with land trusts. So that's one of the messages I really want to emphasize today, is that you do have help in this. And that while there are there's at least several thousand land trusts working across the U.S. and across the entire world. So there are organizations working in your states or your countries that are doing the same kind of work that the trustees are doing, and there's only so much land to go around. And I know that land trusts are looking to partner and expand the number of people that they're working with as well. So one great thing that you can do, regardless if you can just ignore the rest of my presentation, is go home and actually figure out who your local land trust is and just start talking to them about the potential for doing a project together in the future where you can actually protect an entire piece of land that has snowmobile use on it. So these are 5 different ways of working with a snowmobile trail. So you have a regular handshake agreement, verbal. Nothing's really written down between a landowner and a snowmobile club. Does everyone have trails like that are basically just all of them? Right. So that's probably the way that most trails have been functioning, for decades, probably functioning pretty well. The danger, however, is all it takes is someone to not stop shaking your hand, basically, and say, see ya, we don't want that trail there anymore, and there's not much you can do about it. In case you can't see, that far right side of the screen is level of protection. So each of these steps down gets a little bit stronger in how protected that trail can be. So a handshake agreement has very little protection. You have no options if they don't want to work with you. A license or a trail agreement is a written document that actually spells out where the trail is, what are the terms of access, and if the landowner wants to remove that snowmobile trail, how much notice do they need to give the snowmobile club, if there's any other sort of potential for a meeting or a chance to have a conversation and have the snowmobile club address any of the issues that they're concerned about. So again, that's still fairly weak. A landowner will could still give you sometimes it's just 2 weeks, sometimes it's a month notice, but at least gives you an opportunity to have a conversation and try and address their reasons for wanting to remove the trail. Does anyone work with those kind of trail agreements? So they're pretty common too, probably becoming a little bit more common. The next one is a trail easement, and that's what we're going to spend the bulk of today talking about. But I'm going to actually come back to that. So I'm going to skip that for now. The next level down is a conservation easement, and that's the tool that the land trusts have been using for the last 40 or 50 years really successfully to protect land all across the country. And that's a tool that could be used to protect both a piece of land and to kind of preserve the snowmobiling rights in that same document forever. So I'm going to tell you a bit more about that. And then obviously the strongest form of protection is if you, the snowmobile club, actually owns the trail, owns the land. And that might become more and more common too if your club has the resources or very generous landowners who really want to see that protected. So any questions so far? So first we're going to talk about conservation easements, and then I'm going to back up and talk about trail easements. So a conservation easement, the best way to kind of understand this is to think about land. The common analogy is that land could be conceived of as like a bundle of sticks. And when you own land, unlike a lot of other assets, you can actually break apart that bundle of sticks. So if you own land, you own the right to farm it. You own the right to cut the trees. You own the right to dig into the earth for mining or quarrying or whatever, tunneling. And you also have the right to allow the public on your land. You have the right to prevent public access, to post your land. And you can actually start breaking those apart in different ways. So a conservation easement is basically taking the right to develop it, to put houses on it, to pave it, to change its fundamental kind of natural state, and extinguishing that right forever. And the way that that happens is a land trust or a government agency can also serve the same function as a land trust. They are the ones that are given the responsibility of monitoring that stays true forever. So the right is just gone. It's recorded at the Registry of Deeds so that all future landowners are beholden to those terms. And then every year a land trust or a state agency comes onto the property just to make sure that it still looks like this and doesn't have, you know, new driveways or new houses popping up on it. So the benefits of that are, some people actually refer to this in shorthand as I'm selling my development rights, or I'm giving the development rights. So you might have heard landowners talk about it like that. But the landowner still owns the land, and you still have all those other rights for the most part. So you still have the right to farm it, you still have the right to cut the trees, you still have the right to enjoy it, to allow the public on it, to not allow the public on it. And then the land can be sold, and it can be passed on to the next generation, but everyone from then on that owns that land cannot do the same things that, like putting up new houses or paving it. So if snowmobiling is articulated in that document as a right that that landowner keeps, that land is then protected from development, from fragmentation, from somebody dividing it into 20 different parcels. And snowmobiling is a right that will be forever available to future landowners. And then one of the other really nice parts about that is that each easement is actually tailored to the specific piece of land. So it is not a kind of cookie cutter approach. In this kind of picture, they would actually maybe carve out a lot around the house and the barn that would not be subject to this easement. And then the rest of the field would be protected forever. And then a snowmobile trail that, say, ran at the toe of that slope into the woods would be mentioned and protected forever. And as I mentioned, it's the land trust that actually, instead of saying you're giving your development rights to a land trust, technically you are extinguishing those rights, and the land trust is responsible for enforcing those terms forever. So has anyone actually come across land trusts doing this kind of work in their town or their county? Heard about it? Yeah, so this is sort of familiar. Yeah. A lot of times it's done really specifically for farming. There's generally better funding to protect farmland, so that all of the other rights are kind of extinguished except for the right to farm and grow trees or food. Any questions so far on conservation easements? So, yeah, sir.
Question: can they change what is not allowed in the area? What is allowed?
On that piece of land, once it's had an easement on it?
Yep. Once the easement's done, can they change it?
No. So there is a process because there are mistakes made, and there are sometimes you absolutely need to change it. But generally, it requires an act of the legislature to require your state legislature. So it is possible, but it's just a very difficult bar to meet, and it's lengthy and costly and all the rest. So it is theoretically possible, but and very difficult to do. So the tricky part when landowners and land trusts or state agencies are sitting down to negotiate these terms is thinking about all of the future uses of this property. So 40, 50 years ago, people weren't really thinking about solar panels in the middle of a field or wind towers, or who knows what 100 years from now landowners are going to want to do in the middle of their property. So kind of thinking about all the different ways in which you want to try and use your land, and all of the different ways that you want to make sure that that land is essentially preserved. So if the ability to grow food is really the most important thing, then you want to have all of the kind of provisions for that articulated in that conservation easement. So I mentioned this because this is a really important tool that land trusts and state agencies are using all across the country. And the best way for you all as snowmobile advocates to kind of get involved in land protection is to start having conversations with land trusts and with landowners who are perhaps likely to protect their land through a conservation easement, and just mentioning that it is possible to protect the right to snowmobile on your property in the course of this negotiation. Because as I said, every one of these easements is negotiated individually and tailored to that piece of land. So if there's a snowmobile trail that's been there for decades, then ideally that trail gets reflected into that document that is then recorded and part of that land forever. So this is kind of underway all over the world. The best thing you can do is actually try and start inserting snowmobiling into some of these documents. Keep in mind that conservation in a kind of typical habitat, the primary objective for most of these easements is either protecting the land for growing food or trees or protecting habitat. So snowmobiling and recreational access would always be kind of a secondary or third objective to those pieces, but it's definitely possible to use this conservation easement to protect snowmobile trails as well. So that's a powerful way. And then one of the best things I should have mentioned, maybe I don't have a slide on that, is that instead of it just being the trail that's protected, your entire parcel of land is protected in the course of doing those. So your view on either side of the trail, the entire experience of enjoying that piece of land will remain, very similar into the future, as opposed to just protecting a slim corridor that's got your trail on it, which is important, but the experience of enjoying that land will remain the same. So now I'm going to go back up and talk about trail easements, which are very useful for protecting snowmobile trails. So a trail easement is a legal agreement that's also recorded at the Registry of Deeds, which would make it a permanent document. And it is used to provide access, essentially, to anyone. So you could give an easement to me as an individual. You could give an easement to the town, to SAM, the Snowmobile Association of Massachusetts, or to an individual club. It can be negotiated and tailored to a specific landowner or specific area. The easiest way to understand a trail easement is probably to think about utility easements. So this is a power line where the utility company has an easement. The utility company does not actually own all this land in most cases. Some landowner, and it gets complicated because the landowner might not have given these up willingly, but the landowner is still owns land underneath it and on both sides, but the utility company has a right of way to have those telephone pole or those utility lines, and then to maintain the land underneath it every year. But the land underneath is still owned by somebody else, not the utility company. Yes?
If you've got an easement like that, for whatever reason, road or whatever,
Yeah.
can another easement be placed on top of that by the owner of the land, or how does the first person that have the easement have control?
Yep, so it would kind of go by the order in which those easements were laid on top of each other, which one has the most power, whichever one went first. But you could have a whole nest of different easements.
So does it revert back to the owner to make that decision?
Yes, yep. It's always up to the landowner. In all of these cases, it's up to the landowner. So you could, give an easement just for winter access, and have it just be a temporary, seasonal trail easement, or it could be something that's there all year long.
So if I owned the property and I granted an easement to somebody I sold a lot on it.
Yep.
Somebody else, a snowmobile club, wants an easement on that, they'd have to come to me, not the owner of the property that I sold, correct? I mean, the property is off of it. Not the property that I sold, not being on that easement piece.
Sorry, if you don't own the land, then you can't give an easement.
Well, no, I
Right.
understand. Okay, so that property owner that I sold a lot doesn't own the land, so he has no impact.
Right. Right. There was another question over here. Yeah.
Does the landowner have to pay taxes on the easement?
The landowner who owns the land underneath would still pay taxes. The easement holder, the snowmobile club in this instance, would not pay taxes because the landowner might pay taxes, might be higher, might be lower, because it's based on the fair market value of their property. And if there's a trail easement, that might make it less marketable, or it might make it more marketable. There's a lot of times where, properties with immediate access to a trail network are actually really, in higher demand. People, you see them in the real estate listings, 5 minutes to the Vast Trail. Well, you could theoretically, you pay higher taxes if you had a trail, if it was a desirable thing. So let me keep moving. I'm sure there are questions, but we might address some of them as we go along, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So a trail easement, as I said, it's recorded at the registry. That means it's permanent and binding in all future landowners. It can be held by a snowmobile club. It could be held by an individual, but if you wanted it to be permanent, best off having it held by an incorporated organization that's going to be there, 50 years, 100 years from now. As clubs kind of fold or shift, then they can pass the easement on to future clubs. So if clubs start merging or breaking apart, then that easement is essentially an asset that they can pass on to others. So that the easement can be around forever. And importantly, it clarifies the terms of use and maintenance. So the easement will actually specify, no snowmobiling without a minimum snow depth of 6 inches. Trail maintenance can only be managed during the months of November and April or something like that. Or it could just be open-ended. So each of these are negotiated individually and are tailored to the specific needs of the landowner and to the snowmobile club. So the downsides to trail easements are they are legal documents. So in order to have them recorded at the Registry of Deeds and be, binding in all future owners, you have to get attorneys involved. So the snowmobile club, as the recipient of that easement, and the landowner are going to have legal costs. Probably not huge legal costs, especially if you have a document that has been used by other landowners and other clubs. It can become a model or a template that others use, but it is something to keep in mind. Depending on the landowner's interests, if they are avid snowmobile fans, then they might be willing to give or sell one of these, without any problems. If they're a landowner that owns land in hopes of developing it one day or selling it for the highest value one day, then having a constraint, having a kind of legal obligation to maintaining this trail, they may not be, too excited to do this, but they can be persuaded, maybe through financial means. These easements can be donated and they could be sold. So if your club was willing to pay for these easements, that's something that you could do. For the folks that have been doing this, has anyone actually purchased a trail easement? The clubs, do you know? And where is that? Vermont. So that's happening more and more. Anyone else? How about any donations of trail easements? You guys have donated, yeah. Where is that?
Central Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, great.
The Land Trust Project.
With the Land Trust, super. Super. And like I mentioned before with the easement, with the conservation easement, in this case, there's no guarantee that the land on either side of the permanently preserved trail will not be converted to something that may not be all that fun to ride a snowmobile through. But so as you start diving into these are the important provisions. Yes, sir.
When you were going back to where you were talking about an easement for a specific period of time during the year, like the snowmobiling.
Yep.
So you got that easement. It's good from, I don't know, November to May, April. What happens during the rest of the year if somebody decides to come in? Does that easement hold up on that property that they can't put a building in the middle of it or something?
Yes, so I should clarify that. It's not that the easement is only good for a part of the year. The easement is permanent and is true all year long, but it will say that access is only allowed during these months under these conditions. So during the rest of the year, the landowner cannot put up a structure or do anything that would prevent access. Right, so they could put up a gate, they could do what they wanted to do in the rest of the year, but they can't prevent the snowmobile club from coming on to maintain it during those agreed upon times or to use it when when there is a minimum snow depth or during those months. So the actual legal document actually includes all of these provisions, and I have a template up here for you to take home and read in more depth. And I should mention that this project actually came about because SAM, the Snowmobile Association of Massachusetts, hired the trustees to research and create this trail easement. So we've been basically offering training workshops to SAM members over the past year or so in how to understand and how to use these easements. So I've got a couple documents up here that explain the legal ease in greater depth. But since we only have an hour to talk about this subject today, I don't want to get too in-depth into like thou shalt not and thou shalt. But it's here for you to read and take home if you'd like, and I'm happy to answer questions about it if you have them. But these are some of the really key provisions that any trail easement will have. So it will include the width and the location of the trail. We'll have a map attached to it, and probably increasingly GPS data, and have all of that very specific. Generally, you spell out a corridor, maybe 30 feet wide, 50 feet wide, 100 feet wide, in which the trail can move according to what makes the most sense for the trail and for the land, so that you don't have to get real nitpicky to move the trail beyond that. If you have to move it to move this tree or whatever. But you have essentially a trail corridor rather than if you have a 5-foot wide trail or something. It will spell out very specifically the duties and the rights of the landowner. So the duties being, they cannot put up a permanent structure in the middle of the trail and prevent access. So they can't do anything that takes away from the right of the snowmobile club or snowmobilers to use and enjoy that trail. However, they do have the right to use their land pretty much as they always have, other than providing access to the snowmobile trail. So they'll spell all of that out very specifically. If it's a farmer and a piece of land that's used really actively for farming, they might have some very specific provisions around, the ability of this land to grow crops is the primary reason or the primary purpose of this land, and that snowmobiling is kind of secondary to that. But for the most part, it really will spell out the duties and rights of the grantee, which is the snowmobile club in this case as well, and let you know the time of year and the conditions in which you can come in and maintain the trail, if you can use power tools, if you can use four-wheelers to provide access, if you can build bridges, if you can do the kind of large-scale maintenance that is sometimes required. It'll either say that specifically that you can do that or that you can't if that's something that the landowner feels very strongly that you can't. So all of that gets clarified and put down in stone. Liability is, often a concern. Maybe it's just a Massachusetts thing, but a lot of landowners in Massachusetts are very concerned that if I have this kind of permanent ability for snowmobilers to come in and use my land, is that then, exposing me to lawsuits? And the answer is that the trail easement does not actually change your liability at all. So if you have a snowmobile trail on your land, you're already kind of exposed to liability, to greater liability. And the way that the snowmobile club and that the state of Massachusetts tries to help ameliorate that is through, there's a statute called the Mass Recreational Use Statute that says if you allow the public to come recreate on your land and you're not charging a fee, then you will not be found liable for any injury that someone incurs on your land. And that's true of someone that allows hiking, fishing, snowmobiling, four-wheeling, whatever. If someone's allowed on your land and you're not charging them, then you won't be found liable. That doesn't mean that you won't be sued, because anyone can bring a lawsuit for pretty much any reason. So the Snowmobile Club actually maintains an insurance policy that names all of their landowners as additional insured peoples. So that's going to be true whether you have a permanent trail easement or whether or not you have a temporary handshake agreement for that trail. So those are the two kind of responses to landowners who are concerned about liability. Enforcement. So what happens if a landowner does decide to put up a big gate and doesn't remove it in December when the snow starts falling? This easement will actually spell out that the Snowmobile Club has the right to seek injunctive relief, which is basically to go to the court and say, this is a legally binding document, you need to force this landowner to adhere to its terms. So that can be a helpful tool. It would mean that you'd have to involve the court system and probably incur more legal fees, but this is something that that the courts would uphold. And permanence, so it is recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and all future landowners, when they have that deed for their land, this is attached to it and they are subject to its terms. Question in the back.
Well, just a point, in Wisconsin, we found in most cases that because the club has a verbal easement, or the organization has a verbal easement, from October, in our case, I think it is November 1st, April 15th, December 1, April 15th, whatever. But anyway, if there's a concern or a challenge to that legally, we're the easement holder. So if somebody communicates that has had an accident, communicates a legal challenge, generally we found that the challenge comes to the county or to the club operating the trail, not to the landowner.
That's ideal, really. You want to keep those landowners out of those.
Because with tens of thousands of landowners,
Yeah.
the price of the additional insured, because we do have some club-supported trails, club-only supported trails, they've got to be public to the Landowner Liability Act. There's been some question on that. And I guess the way we've always explained it back to our clubs is the fact that who gets the complaint and who's the easement holder
Right.
during the time of the easement. So I think that's going to become a big question.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Now in New York, it's usually when they start suing, they file suit against everyone, landowner, club,
Right.
county, town, village,
Right.
wherever they can.
The neighbor, whoever. Yeah. And there's really very little you can do against that. You can't insure against someone, taking out a lawsuit, but you can probably the liability insurance that the Snowmobile Club carries would provide the legal defense for landowners too, so they don't have to hire their own landowner or their own lawyer. Yeah. There were a couple other hands. Anybody other have points or questions? Okay. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about talking to landowners and trying to actually build a bigger network of permanently preserved easements. But before I move on, does anyone have questions about the kind of specific details of snowmobile trail easements? All right. Well, there's some good reading for you tonight in case you have any trouble sleeping. You can pick up a snowmobile trail easement and it should put you out like a light. Ideally, there's a couple, there's, at least in Massachusetts, and when we were talking to the Snowmobile Club members, usually there was a couple landowners in the room who were both active in the Snowmobile Club and also held land or owned land in which there was a snowmobile trail across. So those are the folks actually that are really perfect to talk to first. Talk about low-hanging fruit. Those folks actually, would be great to at least suss out kind of what some of their concerns or issues, why they wouldn't want to grant a permanent trail easement, and see what you can do to try and address those concerns, and to help you just start crafting the reasons why, a trail easement is a great thing to give or to sell to your snowmobile club. So as you start thinking this over a little bit more, think about who in your club or who your network is, who would be really good folks to kind of test that out on. But if you're talking to landowners who are not snowmobilers, how do you actually start those conversations, and what do you say when the conversation is happening? Well, your club members are probably your best asset in that. You have a diverse and really involved group of people who, especially in rural areas, somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. Use those networks to your advantage to at least, figure out who to talk to. Is this a good time for them? Are they thinking about the future of their land? So, it's tricky because you want to be both opportunistic and strategic. So you don't want to waste your time on somebody that is dead set against this, right? That's pretty obvious. But you also want to stay kind of attuned to landowners that are thinking about selling, thinking about conserving their land, thinking about developing it, and doing what you can to, preserve that easement in the course of that decision making. So sometimes just a simple conversation or a simple letter that says, just want to let you know how important that trail is to us as a club and our hundreds or thousands of members that use it every winter. Just kind of reiterating. Sometimes, landowners, it's way out in the woods. They don't think about it. They kind of remember that snowmobilers use it, but they don't recognize how important it can be, especially as trails start getting fragmented or eliminated in areas. Every last piece of trail could be really important. So once you figure out that person might be open to a conversation, think about who the best person to go and actually talk to that landowner is. If so-and-so's cousin, somebody can be that already knows them, or that is, ideally you'd have a landowner kind of who's already been through this process, or someone that has also, permanently protected their snowmobile trail. Somebody that can speak to them as a peer and say, well, I was worried about that too, and this is the way I kind of started thinking about it, and this is what I did to feel better about it. Pick your spokespeople carefully. You also don't want to make any promises. You don't want to say we can pay you for that easement. We have an active program where we're actually, paying full market value for that. You want to basically just open the door and start the conversation, not make any promises, and see, test the waters, see how willing that landowner might be to, granting an easement. Consider partnering with other groups. As I mentioned, land trusts are there's dwindling amounts of land to be protected or to be developed. And the more that land trusts and sportsmen's groups and snowmobile clubs and whoever else can work together to keep land from getting paved over, we need to build those coalitions as much as possible. So think about who else might have an interest in preserving that land. You don't need to go in and actually ask people to make a decision on something like this right away, or even that year or that winter. You want to basically plant the seed that this is an option for them to consider. That this is a permanent way to protect that trail. But with any kind of permanent decision, that can take a long time for landowners to actually process, to actually come to terms with. So just think of it that way, literally planting the seed. You never know when it's actually going to come to fruition, but just let them know that this is an option for them to consider. When they're thinking about all the different things about the future of their land, that trail is really, really important for you all to have access to in the future. And try and be patient. You never know when that seed is actually gonna take root. Has anybody here talked to a landowner about protecting their trail? Anyone been the spokesperson or thought about protecting a trail on their land themselves? You have, obviously, been thinking about it.
We've had some experiences with it, let's put it that way. They haven't worked out many times, but other times they have. But you mentioned easements with the state have you got in Massachusetts easements that are on state property?
Not on state property, no. Once the state owns it, they will not, I can't think of any reasons or conditions in which they will generally not grant another easement. So there's kind of a hierarchy of ownership, and generally the state and the federal government are, just like regular governments, they're the highest. So once they own it, they don't want to give away any other rights on it.
Do you have any experience with, if you've got a Department of Forestry in the state that has control over property? Have you ever had anything, it's not state property in the sense, the state is overseeing the care of it?
Yep. You mean
The
on?
owner sitting someplace, but the state is taking over kind of like the care of it. Have you had any experience with anything like that?
Not like that, no, but the state does hold those conservation easements. So the land is still owned by a private individual or a family, but the state will own the conservation easement just like a land trust would. So they don't actually take care of the property, but they do kind of enforce the terms of that easement and make sure that the landowner isn't, developing it or mining it.
Basically, in that case, they could do another easement on top of the easement they have. right?
Yep.
Would the owner of the land have any input on that?
The owner of the land has all the input.
So even if the state now has the trust to take care of it,
Yep.
the owner can still,
If it already has a conservation easement on it, a trail easement will be subject to the or to the conservation easement. So the conservation easement in most cases, unfortunately, will say that motorized vehicles are not allowed in most cases. So there might be some that don't, and if they don't, then you could then get a snowmobile trail easement. But that conservation easement, because it was put on first, that would trump the trail easement. However, if it was reversed, so a person could put a trail easement on their land, permanently protecting that snowmobile trail, and then put a conservation easement on their land, saying we won't do all these other things, we'll protect this habitat, we'll preserve that stream, but that snowmobile trail was there first, and so that will always be protected too. So as I mentioned, this was a kind of a pilot project in Massachusetts, and one of the last things that we did was actually take all of the protected lands layers, all these colors are different layers, for clubs in Massachusetts, and then overlay all the snowmobile trails on top of that so that they can start prioritizing who they want to go talk to, which trails and which landowners are top priority. So all of these colored blocks are protected lands of one form or another. I think green is State Department of Conservation and Recreation. Purple is the organization I work for, or other land trusts. Light green is a different agency in the state. And as you can see, these red lines are the snowmobile trails. There are a couple trails that are absolutely critical for the local club. If they were to get cut off, they would lose two major hubs, these kind of trails that connect bigger areas. So this might be a worthwhile exercise in your area too. Like you could see, if one landowner over here decided to cut off that trail, then all of this northern area to the southern kind of block of trails down here would be cut off. There's not a lot of other options. So it may not have to be quite as fancy as this, but you might want to actually take a look at your trail map and figure out, where are those key corridors. They're important. They're hugely important for, preserving the access that you need to go for, a ride that's, of some substance and enjoyment. And I should mention that those corridors, generally corridors between two blocks of protected land, are also top priority for land trusts, basically for wildlife movement. They'll need that same kind of corridor. So if and when you have the opportunity to talk to landowners that own those pieces of land, talking to land trusts that might have access to funding, if that's a major need, that could be a great partnership and way to actually get some of these trails protected and land protected. So that's all the slides I have for you, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you have or hear more about your efforts or obstacles to protecting trails in your neck of the woods. Yes, sir.
Have you ever had any experience where you have a trail and a town itself steps in and blocks the trail?
I have not. I've not heard of that, but it sounds like Mr. Wisconsin has. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
we've run into it quite a few times in Wisconsin. And, the only real way you have to combat that in a community or in a township is to get as many of your membership together that are voters in that jurisdiction to battle it. Especially in and around the Madison area, or the areas that are really, really liberal and anti. We join forces as much as we can. And that's where a relationship with the other users really help. In the Dane County, the Madison area, we've actually done a lot together with the equestrian people. Because we've actually gotten a common ground with them, and we actually use the systems at a different time. And boy, it's nice having double or triple the members to do that. But the more forces, the more other user groups you can join with. And sometimes the antis will make your organization stronger on that. But we've actually had some success in overturning some stuff.
Well, the specific area I'm thinking of is, it's not town land as such, they're denying access on their town road.
Correct.
So the equestrians and other users really won't come into play.
Yeah, we have the same thing. Wisconsin does have a statute that allows the communities for local access. Okay, but you still have to go after the jurisdiction in Wisconsin to get permission to use if you're on the public right of way. But again, about all you can do on that is to get as many users together and keep it as open as you can to reverse that.
Yeah. Keeping your membership engaged and on top of these kind of issues is definitely a really powerful way of getting results. There was just a project that closed on Monday where a farmer with 350 acres in Spencer, Massachusetts, it was a pretty complicated deal. Part of the land went with a agricultural preservation restriction, which is just like that conservation easement but dedicated to agriculture. Part of the land went to Mass Audubon, and then the local club, the Spencer Snowbirds, were able to preserve the trail that they had on both parcels of land because the people kind of working the deal from the Mass Audubon Society, which is like a land trust, recognized that they needed the public support. They needed their town meeting to vote in favor of this and to devote some public money to it. And the way in which they could make sure that happened is to get the Snowmobile Club fully on board with that, both from a vote and from a fundraising perspective. So it was a great partnership with three kind of distinct interests, but the Snowmobile Club was, won out, definitely, got their trail protected forever, and did so because they had, 800 members or something like that in that area. Yeah, sir.
Also, another thing that we found successful was we engaged local businesses to benefit. We're having that trail in there, the food stops, the gas stops, pond stops. We go to those local businesses, organize recreationalists together. And a lot of times in the smaller communities, some of those very people be on those municipality boards.
Yes, sir.
If you have a trail easement on the piece of property, and then it's not the conservation easement, but just your trail one, and the property gets sold around it,
Yep.
can they close the trail because they decide it's a nuisance?
No, I mean, that's the beauty of it. They could make it less enjoyable to ride there, if it's a parking lot on both sides. It may not be all that great, but no, it could, especially as a pre-existing trail with an easement on it, those future landowners, on either side, even if the parcel of land gets divided, would be subject to this easement. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of almost mind-boggling because it's permanent, it's forever. So 1,000 years, theoretically from now, whoever owns that land is going to be subject to that easement. Yes, sir.
Did you just say that landowners on either side of it would be subject to that easement?
So it could get divided. There could be one landowner that can create different parcels of land. They could sell this side over here and then that side over there. But whoever owns the land underneath that snowmobile trail would still be.
Okay, but if you've got 3 separate parcels that has, like you have here, we've got parcels that are protected and none protected in between.
Yep.
Trails on either side of that protected parcel could basically make that protected parcel
Yep.
inaccessible.
Yep. Right. Yeah, it could be like essentially a landlocked trail. Yeah, I mean, that's why connecting two blocks of permanently protected, if there's a chunk on state land, and it's likely that the state is always going to allow snowmobile access, those would be the top targets, because no matter what, those are going to be available. Yeah. Yes, sir, in yellow.
Did you say you had a handout or a recipe book on how to?
I do. So what I have is this is a model easement. So this is a legalese, and the paragraphs in here are numbered. And then this is the non-legalese document that explains each paragraph. So you can kind of follow back and forth and say paragraph 1, and this is the kind of translation of it. So not that the legalese is all that bad, but in case you want to know what in the world that's really spelling out. And then I just have a couple other things which summarize one of my slides that talk about what is a license or a trail agreement, what is a conservation easement, and what is a trail easement. So you can have those three things kind of defined, the pros and the cons with each one. And then this handout has a little bit more detail in terms of talking to landowners about trail easements, some handy tips that one slide summarized a lot of, but this also has some more. So feel free to take one of these on your way out. Any other questions, stories? Yeah.
Of course, we'd all be interested in trying to get an easement basically for nothing from the
Right.
landowner.
Yep.
What kind of tax advantages are there for a landowner who might provide an easement?
For a conservation easement, there are tax advantages because the way that the federal IRS recognizes the public benefit of that donation. Essentially, if you're giving a gift of anything, of land, of money, stocks, to a nonprofit organization, then that is tax deductible. I don't believe snowmobile clubs are generally, they might be nonprofits, but not charitable nonprofits. There's a slight, yeah. So they would not be,
So,
right.
we're working on a 501c3 that would be a charitable organization.
Uh-huh.
Actually, one of the purposes of doing it is to create it as a trust, something that would be a place to receive these easements. Because the problem we have,
Right.
we're working with trusts, and I don't mean this in any bad way, is quite frankly, a lot of times we don't trust them. That they might gather an easement, and then once they hold the easement, then we're subject to their property right. It's not our property right.
Right, that's why you want to get it in the easement itself, because then it's really not,
Even if they hold an easement,
yeah,
if they hold the easement, and the easement is for snowmobile use,
uh-huh,
they still have to give us permission to use it.
I see, yeah.
So,
Yeah, unless if public access and snowmobiling were both articulated in the easement, then it would be hard to prevent you from using it, but those are hard things to get into an easement. So if it says, especially if public money is being used to purchase that easement, then generally public access has to be allowed forever as well. And then if snowmobiling is a use that's allowed, they basically can't post the land, and they would have to allow snowmobiles. But it might be in your best interest to have your own organization, that is devoted just to allowing and holding those easements. Yeah.
so if there's a value to the easement,
Yep.
property value to it, theoretically,
Yep.
the landowner could, and if the organization is a 501c3 charitable
Yep.
organization, that they could provide that easement and get a tax benefit for doing it.
Yep. So that would be an income tax deduction for the landowner. And then perhaps it would have other tax implications if the land is then theoretically worth less on the market. If it's subject to that trail easement, they can't just put house lots all over it. Then they might pay slightly less in property taxes, or they might pay less in estate taxes. That asset is worth less.
Have you done any work in the area of easements as legacy gifts?
You mean after someone dies and gives them in their will? Yeah, that's I wouldn't say it's common, but it does certainly happen. Ideally, not as a complete surprise to any of the parties, because that's never really fun when the beneficiaries find out that the land's going to the, the land trust instead, or the land trust says, oh, actually, we don't really want that piece of land. But it certainly is something that I think will become increasingly common, as the baby boomer generation landowners are kind of aging in general. That's a great tool and a great option to present to landowners. You don't have to do it now in your lifetime, but consider giving us that gift in your will. Yep. And that still can have really good tax implications, as it would be part of that whole estate. So, when the whole estate is valued, if a donation is part of that, then, that estate is worth less, and then we'll have less in estate taxes. Yeah. But all of these, if you don't have a great relationship with your land trust, then maybe it's not, a great time to start. But, I really do strongly believe that land trusts in general are starting to think about, they know that they need to diversify and have, stronger partnerships and coalitions with folks. And, especially if you have a landowner that wants to kind of work with both parties, it's a great way to build a foundation for future projects. Because it's just too important not to start working with folks. There's no reason why snowmobiling and land conservation can't be compatible.
Can you describe a little bit how a land trust is structured and how they're funded? And I didn't realize they could own property.
Yeah, yep. So every land trust is a little bit different, but all kind of fall under the same charitable, so they're all nonprofit organizations, 501c3s. And then depending on how they function, some land trusts decide just to work on conservation easements, and some land trusts decide just to own land. And then there's a bunch in the middle, like the trustees, that do both. The land that we own is considered privately owned, but because it's in our mission, our charter is to open it up to the public. In order for us to continue to basically not pay property taxes on it, and to be considered a 501c3 in good standing, we have to open up all of our land to the public. If the land trust, there could be land trusts that in their mission or their charter just say we're devoted to helping landowners protect their land, and their main tool is that conservation easement, then they wouldn't have to open up any land to the public. But they basically use that conservation easement and some variations of it to help landowners, receive the tax deductions, to know that their land is not, ever going to be built upon or changed in any major way in the future. And it will, still be the land that they love and want to see preserved through that easement. And there are other ways of structuring those deals. The conservation easement is the most kind of straightforward, even though it is confusing in and of itself. As we talked about, you could give it in your will. You can create a situation where you have the right to stay on your land until you die, but receive the tax benefits of the gift while you're alive. And then upon your death, the land gets transferred to a land trust. There's basically a whole lot of creativity that people can use to structure those deals. Yes, sir?
Well, I've heard some things in our county that they're talking about is whenever a land goes up for taxes, if it's in your trail system, to buy it, put an easement on it, put the easement in it, then sell it.
Yeah.
That's the way to get around it, they said. You buy the land up at the tax auction.
Yeah.
And then put the easement on it, then you can resell it.
That's definitely part of being opportunistic and strategic all at the same time. Yeah. I mean, right. There's always that, and then there's the question of whether your snowmobile club really wants to be in the real estate business, and that gets really complicated really quickly.
Because it was going to be left to nobody, but they didn't want it.
Yeah.
So we took it, and now we own that property.
Right, which is great, but that's different than actively being a member, buying and selling and getting kind of savvy on the real estate market. As we know from recent years, that can burn people depending on how much you pay for it. But yeah, I mean, that would be one great way of doing it. That's, and it's possible, land trusts sometimes do this, and sometimes it's not very clear to the public, but they will often buy land or, take a donation of land and protect, 80% of it, and then carve off 2 building lots, and then sell those building lots to pay for the purchase of the rest of it. And that way, you're obviously providing new housing for people and protecting the most important part of that parcel. So that's called limited development, and that's something that your clubs could use, to the same purposes. Yeah, yeah.
Can, this is gonna sound like a silly question, but can a trail easement be non-route specific?
I think theoretically it could be. I think it would be very hard to get a landowner to agree to that, but if you had a landowner that said, yeah, you can put it anywhere.
Well, I was actually thinking about it from the other point of view, that we would buy a right to cross a property subject to the landowners picking where.
Yep.
Because, for instance, with forest products, we have a lot of large landowners.
Yep.
They want to move the trail all the time.
Yep.
But if we held an easement, it's gonna get complicated, but if the state ever bought the property, the state's still subject to our easement unless they extinguish our easement, which in New York they can't. But it gets a little complicated, but.
Yeah, I think you could do that. I think you could have the right to pass on that parcel of land, given. It would have a whole lot of but same would be true for farmers, I would imagine. Depending on what crop they're growing this year, something might be the case over the winter that they don't want you using this part of the field, but over here would be fine, and next year would be the reverse. So I think that would be possible. Yeah.
Dom, you have master plans for your state purchase properties?
Yes.
See, and I think that's where, in our case anyway, if they have a trail going through there, if it's public property and the trail runs in a certain location, there's stipulations and boundaries to move it. If it gets too far out or it changes too much, when the property is purchased, it receives a master planning process, then that has to be reopened. The bad news for that is it takes a long time. The good news for us is if somebody challenges your use, at least it gives you a process so that you have the right to respond to that. And another thing that we found out, and that is on a couple of in Wisconsin, we have multiple use trails where the state either owns, controls, or maintains certain trails. One thing that we were able to prove in a couple of those sections when landowners and property owners and homeowners complained that, that trail next to my house is gonna ruin my property value. Checked in a couple of spots where along the Military Ridge Trail and the Glacial Drumlin Trail in southern Wisconsin, we actually proved where it enhanced the property values.
Yeah.
Local realtors were, and of course, the realtors are commissioned salespeople. So any benefit to those properties to sell it. We were actually able to prove it enhanced in most cases. As a matter of fact, in every case I've been involved with, it's enhanced your property value.
Yep.
So
Kind of.
you can use that, you can throw it right back at them.
Of course, that can bite you the other way too, is that if it enhances your property value, you're paying more taxes on that property too. So
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword.
And luckily, and that was brought up, especially in some high property value areas, luckily that hasn't come back to snap us.
Right.
Because when the property is for sale, when the property is being purchased, they're not thinking about that.
Right.
And we've also been lucky